Hello, and welcome to the Kink Perspective. My name's Chris. I'm a psychotherapist and consultant. On this episode, I want to talk about something a little bit different, something I haven't really dove into, but I've seen a little bit more discussion. I've talked about it lately with some of my colleagues. I want to talk about today our chemical attraction to our significant other or to the partner that we're with. What I'm talking about is when you first meet someone, you have those feelings of falling in love, and it's not just that emotional and cognitive process you feel. There's actually also a chemical process that we feel, the serotonin, the dopamine, the neuroepinephrine. But there's another side to all of this. It's being attracted to our partner's chemical and pheromone sense that really drive us and want us to be around someone. For example, you wake up in the morning with your partner, she goes off to work, and we roll over and we can smell her washed hair on the sheets or whatever perfume she might have been wearing the night before. So we decided as guys or girls or whoever to roll over and cuddle that pillow so we can kind of absorb our partner. Or for some women dating men, that they are so enthralled with their scent of that musky smell that they have a favorite t-shirt of that guy that they're dating, and they want to wear it all the time. We're starting to see this phenomenon grow more and more now, where we're seeing people who are within different social media roles that are obviously they're doing more, not just of the body hair, which isn't a really big phenomenon, but they're also getting more into the natural body odors. So when I initially was reading this, I'm like, oh, well, that's kind of interesting. But what I soon discovered was that people were actually quite attracted to this person and enjoyed their scent. So when I looked into this process, there was actually quite a bit of science and thoughts behind it because of what happens in our mind and the chemicals that, despite all the evidence indicating that body odor or anything else is or isn't an important driver in our mate selection. A lot of studies have only investigated one side of this. They've looked at females, and then obviously inside of that case study was obviously with strangers, people they didn't really know or really weren't familiar with, and they wanted to get the reaction. But when we started looking at the different levels and the different things that attract us when we are in different phases of the relationship, so different phases such as our initial attraction, when we're going into long-term attachment, whether it's just a relationship built on sex or lust. All of these different things have different levels and different hormones that we experience neurochemically that are produced by us. So if you think about it, the last time you found somebody that was really attractive or someone that you really started getting close to, you may have stammered a little bit, you've kind of can't get your words out, you're stumbling all over yourself. All of a sudden you're starting to sweat or you're getting really warm. You may have said something really stupid and kind of just walked away. God, I just made a huge idiot of myself. One of the reasons why these types of things happen physiologically to us is that as our adrenaline is going in this new attraction and we're starting to get a cross pheromone scent and our receptors in our brain, our neuroreceptors, our heartbeat starts getting elevated, right? And it's no surprise that for millennia, people thought that love and most other emotions for that matter only arose from our heart, that we didn't really have an understanding that they're a chemical reaction and part of the emotional process in our mind. But as it really turns out, the reality is that love is something that takes place inside of our mind. And then through our central nervous system that controls everything throughout our body, kind of screws up all of those processes along the way. Now, there have been scientists all over the world, Rutgers University, Oxford, Harvard, Stanford, University of Canberra, so on and so forth, that have kind of looked at love in three distinct and specific categories. And I kind of mentioned it before: lust, attraction, and attachment. And each category is specifically and uniquely has its own set of hormones that stem from the brain when there is something that's starting to happen between two people. So looking at this study, what was quite interesting is the first part was they engaged with attraction, right? So when we first meet somebody, and one of the first neuroreceptor chemicals that started to be released was dopamine, neuroepinephrine, and serotonin. So the stuff that makes us happy, giddy, makes us kind of feel those little bit of butterflies in our stomach. As we moved forward and they started looking at the next level of all of everything that was going on, they found through attachment, through its long-termness, there was more steady stream of oxytocin released. And finally, when we get into that area of where it's just kind of more primal, and quite a bit of people can identify, and we can even think of it as even a one-night stand, for example, we look at elevated levels of testosterone and estrogen. So we understand and we know that lust is the primary function is for sexual gratification. It's not always about just procreation, right? It's something that's evolutionarily grained inside of us. It's part of our DNA to procreate, to move on, right? And when we also use that and intertwine that in our need and our desire to want to reproduce, which is a part of almost everything that's mammalian in nature. And through this reproductive process, this lust-driven process, we pass on our genetic blueprint and we continue the perpetuation of the species that keeps us moving forward. It's why we've survived tens of thousands of years now, or a few thousands of years now, as the human race and all the other species that came before and during our process. Now, what they do know is that there's a big part of our brain that really stimulates those production of the sex hormones, right? It really gets our juices flowing. And through this part, I don't want to bore you with the specificalities of what part. These chemicals, though, they're often, turns out that they really just increase the libido. Testosterone shoots it up because all of a sudden our hypothalamus in the brain is really kind of releasing that chemical signature. Our levels of testosterone go up. They're not as strong or the estrogen isn't as strong as when we're sexually excited as testosterone levels are. But obviously that changes. We look at women who are, when it's that time of the month, there is, mixed reports with people. Some women find themselves more sexually aroused during when they're ovulating, and when their levels of estrogen are going to be the highest, right? So we look at these things and we start to understand the bare principle that we are now not just emotionally driven or cognitively driven, we are also chemically driven. We're chemically drawn to our partners and everything that kind of surrounds that. And there's nothing wrong with that when we look at that, because we have to understand, all of those little giddy feelings, when we're acting irrationally around somebody that we're with, especially, if you think about it, we're starting to fall in love with somebody. We're tripping over our own feet constantly. We're saying dumb things. We just feel good. We can't get enough of our partner. Right? We can feel their pain. Our empathy levels are through the roof. We are literally hardwired to feel pain. And sometimes when our partner's in actual pain, we can feel that through our empathetic response. When our partner's in a bad mood, because we're so neurochemically synced, we become in a bad mood. There are married couples that report that when one partner is menstruating, the other partner, in this example of a husband and wife are married, and the wife is going through her menstrual cycle, it has been reported that the husband will start experiencing cramps or might become clumsy. I do apologize if it's a little loud. It's raining here today, so it's quite loud on my roof. Anyway, moving on. When we get to the area of love, right? When I'm talking about attraction, it seems to be its own closely related phenomenon that can work in tandem with lust or without. But attraction is quite unique in the fact that it is involved more on the pathway that controls our reward sensories, our rewarding behavior, which partially explains why in the first few months or maybe even that first year of a relationship, we typically call this the honeymoon phase, can be so exhilarating and even all-consuming. We stop talking to our friends. We may not keep going to the dungeon parties. We are really kind of just isolating ourselves with our partner. Now, this is when our friends are like, hey, you've been spending an awful lot of time together. We don't see you guys. What's going on? And then one of the reasons why is the dopamine levels that we're producing, right, that are being overproduced or overstimulated by the hypothalamus, is part of that pathway where the brain's being rewarded. And it's released when we're doing things that feel good to us. Like if you go out and hit the gym and you've had a really good workout and you're feeling good, you get that high from that dopamine. But in this particular case that I'm talking about, spending time with those we love, being intimate with them, they not only release high levels of dopamine, they release norepinephrine. And that's really, as our attraction's growing, we're really honing in. And these chemicals make us, we're always smiling, we feel energetic, we even get that euphoric feeling. Sometimes if you think about it, we're texting somebody all night. We're talking to them all night on the phone. We can't sleep because we can't wait till the next day to go ahead and see them. Hell, we don't even want to eat when they're not around, right? We want to do everything with these people. And we sometimes mistake in that we're so in love with somebody that, I can't commit to doing anything without them. It does pay, the reason, if some of you have ever heard, norepinephrine or noradrenaline, it's also part of our fight, flight, or freeze response, right? Which, when we're extremely in a high stress situation, it keeps us alert and ends up keeping us hyper vigilant, right? So we start looking at all of these things in combination, and the third component to attraction is a reduction actually in serotonin that's known to be involved in the appetite and our mood. So interestingly enough, people who are, suffer from OCD, for example, that are have some other compulsion, also have lower levels of serotonin, which sometimes allows us to, we're curious, or researchers become curious if it's the overpowering infatuation that characterizes the beginning stages of love and how closely related it is, right? Now, lastly, I want to kind of look at one thing, when we're talking about like attachment. So if we have a best friend or, really good friends we like to hang out with, and they're there for us, so on and so forth, we may, but we're not, in an intimate relationship with them. So some may even consider this like best friend status or the friendstone status. But in attachment, this becomes a factor when we have long-term non-intimate relationships. Lust and attraction are really much more exclusive into romantic engagements between people. And that attachment, that when we bring the word attachment in, it's more where we're disengaging from the intimate side, and we're really more navigating that friendship side, and kind of moving from there. The two primary the two primary hormones here that surround this kind of friend zone, this attachment that's non-romantic, are most aptly oxytocin and vasopressin. Oxytocin is nicknamed the cuddle hormone, right? We get with our partners, we've had a really good intimate connection, and we just want to cuddle, right? We're both wanting a little nap, so we cuddle together. And that feeling just is wonderful. We're kind of wrapped in their warmth, we're wrapped around their essence, we're really kind of drawing them in. And it's released in this stage in large enough quantities, even during sex or breastfeeding or childbirth, And it's kind of a weird, strange assortment of activities that some of these activities, obviously, they're not all great and enjoyable. Some women I know that don't swear they'll never have another child because of the pain they went through, or they want to be drugged up. Some have had, when these chemicals are being released during sex or intimate activities, they will discuss, not wanting to do it again with that person. But the main thing, the one commonality in any of these events, or even, an extreme, like the Ironman or triathlon, if you're doing that with like a really close friend, these are all precursors to that feeling of bonding, right? And that scenting we get. And when we think about all of these chemicals that are being released, even these different stages, our noses aren't as sensitive. Our sense of smell obviously isn't as keen as animals. However, the reality is that when we look at all of these different signs, we can see when we're in these different levels with people, and then how will we react. When we have a really close friend, we might just, we enjoy when we haven't seen a friend maybe from high school for 20 years, and we give them a big hug, and instantly when we do, we can we take them in. We breathe in, their essence, for lack of a better word, and we are instantly transported. We have a quick regression in our mind. We are dive straight into our memories, and we recall what it was like to be with them, 20 years prior. When we're in that lust phase, when we're in those attraction phases, we're really starting to soak up different levels of the people that we're with. Where some people have reported attraction to people's body odor, right? Some others were talking about, I've had one person mention that they were really even attracted to someone's breath, that it was, for them, smelled like cologne. There have been different instances, and it's been reported that people smell things such as, one person smells grass, or another person will smell baked goods when they think of their partner, and their partner's been around or gets ready for work and leaves for the day. And men with stronger scents tend to receive larger neurological or neurochemical responses from their mate. Sometimes those are good, though. We need to understand the fact that sometimes those neurological and neurochemical effects are wanted and are desired, especially when we add lust with attraction. But when we're kind of in that friend zone, and that chemical scent is kind of overpowering for us, we then find ourselves almost maybe even a little repulsed or sometimes sickened by it. But when we're really like looking at some of these phases as well, and what's really interesting here, when we get back to the attraction stage, you're kind of in this as this rush of these feel-good chemicals is overtaking you, and you're wearing your favorite sweater while you're laying there reading a book, waiting for them to get home. This rush of these feel-good chemicals and scents that are overtaking you. Another question I get is, do these feelings ever fade? I want to feel like this forever. Well, unfortunately, most of this is predominant in the early stages of our dynamics and our relationships, where we're super enthralled with the person we're with. We don't want to be with anybody else, and we just want to explore who they are and what they mean to us. That's that whole process of what we're kind of wrapped in. It's not necessarily a problem that these feelings fade. And this can occur anywhere from, 3 months into a relationship and up to 2 years into a relationship. It also is dependent on our chemical shifts, our own body. We might start using a new body wash, and then all of a sudden that scent we did have mixes with the chemicals in our body wash plus our bodily chemicals, and all of a sudden we've created a new scent that can actually turn partners off. And that passionate level of love and intimacy and intensity that you feel, you kind of start to transition towards that second phase of attraction, or love as we know it, or even lust, which can be more about, we can aptly characterize it as more companionship or attachment style love, where you're really now at this stage, you've moved on getting to know each other. but we're still hooked on, you know, where these scents are and how much they mean to us. And every time then, even if our partners, even if we've had a fight, grabbing their shirt or grabbing their purse or a pillow, when you're chemically bonded to someone, it still remains, there are still cases of people 20, 30 years on that they're intoxicated by that natural scent. It's not something that doesn't go away for them. So there's no real gauge here on whether or not that chemical attraction to our partner and their scent really does fade. There is a kind of a standard that people look at, and that's why I gave you kind of a range, anywhere from 3 months to 12 or to 2 years. But if we decide to start living with someone and their pheromones are constant, especially if they have strong pheromones, which are kind of that elusive draw. If you've ever found yourself around somebody and you are just drawn to your partner's presence, and that's, if when we start to think about it, that could be one of the reasons that we were attracted to each other in the first place. And once you're with that person, you have your partner's natural scent, and it can have you, it makes you feel at home. It makes you feel safe, comforted, secure, right? When we know that smell of someone that's close to us, and we're releasing that oxytocin in our mind, right? That feel-good kind of cuddle response I talked about earlier, right? It's a neurotransmitter that just does so many wonderful things for us. We start getting reminded, like when we're hugging or kissing them, or even being intimate with them. And we get this similar feeling, this similar high, every time we smell something of our partners. And it's true. And if you're in a relationship right now and you're listening to this, grab your partner's favorite sweater that you love seeing them, or their favorite shirt you love seeing them in. You know, the one question I did receive is this why men sniff women's underwear? And that's a little bit different. There would be a little bit of some of this pheromone. They are obviously scenting more for vaginal secretions than they are possibly for anything else, but it could be. It could be. And it still would give them that oxytocin release. It's going to give them that feel-good release. And I'm really kind of honing in more on the non-sexualized items, although, you know, everything sets everybody else, sets everything off differently. Finally, I want to kind of really hone in and look at, you know, when we're really chemically bonded to our partner, when we're really we're in lust with them, we're everything about them moves us, we are attracted on all of these levels. The one thing that is so important to understand is that when we are intimate, it's different, right? Sometimes we've all had, you know, more or most people in their life have potentially had a one-night stand, and for the most part, we're not really super attached to that person afterwards. Guys get up and leave. You know, women will say, all right, I'm going to bed, get out. Whatever the case may be. For men, sad to tell you, or sorry to tell you, you know, we have a lot less oxytocin that's released after we have an orgasm than women do. Now, that's not an explanation of why these guys get up and leave. It's just, you know, if there's no attraction, there was the lust part of it there, but we're missing the other part, right? Feeling attachment for someone one way or another, especially when we're talking about after sex, it can depend on variables like the sex you're having, like what types of sex you're ascribing to, or who you are with, or where you are. If you feel like sex with your partner, and it's deep and it's meaningful and you're connected, you're really starting to understand that you're not just connected because, you know, oh my God, I found the right person, but there's a chemical bond there. And we get that as warm and fuzzy feelings. They're the ones that are making our eyes roll in the back of our head. They're curling our toes when we are, you know, in an intimate setting. We're wanting to wrap ourselves up in their essence and snuggle into them, or have a nap, or we're on the couch and it's a crappy weekend and we want to just get comfy and be next to them and take them in, right? If a connection like this, right, through this hormone makes us feel so connected and so attached to the person we've just been with, our willingness to explore a relationship with someone tends to have very few limits. And when we look at this in a BDSM context, so how does this all tie in? Well, we know that in the beginning of any type of dynamic, we're spending months, weeks at least, getting to know someone. Time and time again, I run into people that are, I'm 1 or 2 weeks in and they're already giving me orders and commands. Well, how do you know what each other wants? What are you really building? Where's the attraction? Where is that real drive, right? But again, to each their own. I'm not really judging anybody, that's not really what I'm talking about. But as we're starting to move on and we're moving that negotiation phase and we're really kind of getting to that point where we're negotiating our limits and we're getting to these stages where we really feel connected, we're really starting to chemically bond, our partner's scents drive us wild, our man walks out the door and he's wearing his favorite cologne the night that you met him, and it just makes you crazy. You're counting the minutes until he gets home, or she walks out after just blow drying her hair and the scent just drives you crazy, right? We're chemically bonded at this point. And we're willing at that moment, especially the further we get into relationships, to start testing those boundaries, to start testing those limitations. Because we want to explore with that person that we're really having this overwhelming feeling of care and devotion and love towards. There just may be more to it than you realize. And there's nothing wrong with not knowing and understanding all of our attractions. And it does go deeper than this. There's a lot of reading. There's a wonderful professor, Dr. Richard Stevenson and Ian Stevens, that have written some really wonderful research on this. There's beautiful articles out of Stanford on this type of information. And if you're really interested, I encourage you to look into it. They're good reads. Even if some of this stuff is a little dry, at least it gives you the ability to understand a little bit further why you're so attracted to your partner, why you're so well driven by how they're making you feel, why you still feel excited after all of these years when they walk by and you smell that scent. Or you even implore your partner not to switch colognes or not to switch soap, right? Because neurochemical and chemical response we get through our scent receptors is one of the other main things that really drives our connection. And I know it's a lot to think about. I try to keep this a little bit as easy and not get into too much of the heavy neuroscience of it all, which is even above where I like to be, even though I get it. But have a think about it. Next time with your partner, go take a smell. Breathe them in and see the type of reaction that you get. See how much it excites you. And drop me a line. Let me know what it does for you, what kind of feeling it gives to you. You might just find that your next prelude to sexual erotic play or foreplay could be sitting with each other and breathing each other in. See how well that does for you. Until next time, everybody, be safe and stay tuned.